The ranger loved quiet trails, early coffee, and long walks with his golden retriever. The little girl loved drawing, but hadn't spoken since her father died. The dog, he never barked, until one stormy afternoon when he dragged her screaming into the woods. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The morning sun rose slowly over the jagged peaks of northern Arizona, bathing the red rocks of Echo Canyon in hues of rust and gold. The crisp air carried the scent of wet pine and distant rain remnants of the passing monsoon season that had soaked the desert floor the night before. Small wisps of fog clung to the cliff edges like secrets unwilling to leave. The quiet hum of cicadas and the distant cry of a hawk pierced the serenity of the early light. The town of Pinefield, nestled a few miles west, still slept. But up here among the mesas and bluffs, Colton Hayes was wide awake. Colton was a 30-year-old park ranger recently assigned to the Echo Ridge district. He stood just over 6 feet tall with a broad, athletic frame shaped by years of working outdoors. His sun-tanned skin bore the freckles of long patrol days, and his short, sandy brown hair often stuck out from under his ranger cap in unruly tufts. His eyes, an unusual shade of storm gray, had the quiet watchfulness of someone who had seen both the grandeur and danger of nature. Colton had grown up in Pinefield before leaving for forestry school in Flagstaff, and had returned after a decade away, drawn home by something unspoken. He was calm, dependable, often reserved in speech, but underneath he carried a certain tenderness shaped by loss. 5 years earlier, his younger brother had fallen during a climbing accident in the very canyons he now patrolled. It had left Colton with a deep respect for these rocks, and a subtle, almost spiritual sense of responsibility to protect life here. His jeep crawled along the gravel path winding near the edge of the canyon. The radio was crackling, static, no alerts, just routine. As he scanned the rocks, something caught his attention, a flicker of movement just beyond the ridge. He slowed the vehicle, narrowed his eyes, and peered through binoculars. There, on a narrow ledge about 20 feet down, a vertical drop, clung a golden retriever. The dog's fur was muddied and damp-matted in places, but its golden coat still shimmered faintly in the sunlight. It was panting hard, clearly exhausted, and one of its hind legs trembled as if injured or strained. The ledge was barely wide enough for the dog to crouch. Any shift in weight and it could fall into the canyon below. Colton's chest tightened. No collar, no harness, no sign of humans nearby. This wasn't a pet on a trail. This dog had gotten here by accident. The trail above was steep and the rock face slick from rain. The only way the dog had survived was by pure luck, and the only way it would survive now was if someone acted fast. Without hesitation, Colton reached into his trunk for rope, carabiners, and a harness. He spoke aloud to the dog from above, projecting calm. "Hey there, buddy, hang on, I'm coming down." Colton's hands moved with practiced speed. He tied a secure anchor around a weathered pine, tested his line, and began the slow, careful descent. Dust and gravel crumbled beneath his boots as he made his way down the vertical face, the rope taut in his gloved hands. The wind caught his jacket and whipped it behind him like a cape, the scent of juniper swirling all around. The dog whimpered softly, tail tucked, eyes wide. But it didn't bark or snarl. It seemed to sense Colton meant no harm. When he finally reached the ledge, Colton crouched low, speaking in a calm whisper. "You're okay. I got you." The dog, though trembling, allowed him to approach. Up close, he could see the animal was young, maybe 2 years old, its eyes amber and intelligent, its build lean and strong, despite the situation. Gently, Colton wrapped the makeshift harness around the dog's torso and secured the carabiners. When he tested the pull on the rope, the dog flinched, but didn't resist. In one coordinated effort, Colton began the climb back up, supporting the dog against his chest. The final meters were grueling, but with one last heave, they both rolled onto solid ground. Colton lay on his back panting as the dog licked his cheek. He chuckled, breathless. "You're a brave one," he muttered. "Rusty, that's what I'll call you." Later that afternoon, as Colton drove toward the ranger station with Rusty curled quietly in the passenger seat, he stopped by the Pinefield trailhead. There, near a wooden signboard, stood a woman in her late 30s reading a laminated map. She had shoulder-length auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, a practical windbreaker over a faded denim shirt, and jeans dusted with trail grit. Her name was Beth Turner. Beth had been Colton's neighbor growing up 2 houses down, though she was a few years older. Once spirited and free-spirited, Beth now carried a quieter energy. Since losing her husband 2 years earlier in a camping accident, she had become more guarded, focused entirely on raising her daughter. Her eyes, though kind, always looked like they were searching for something just beyond the horizon, maybe peace, maybe clarity. She turned as Colton approached. "Colton Hayes," she said with a soft, surprised smile. "Haven't seen you in years." Colton nodded, stepping out. "Beth, it's been a while." Her gaze shifted to the golden retriever beside him. "Who's your friend?" "Just rescued him from a cliff at Echo Ridge. No tag, no microchip. Figured I'd keep him until someone comes looking. I call him Rusty." Beth reached out a hand, and Rusty sniffed it cautiously before wagging his tail. "He seems sweet. He's something else," Colton said. Just then, a child's voice called from behind the trees. "Mom." A girl ran up the path, a small figure with long brown hair and a serious expression. She clutched a worn sketchbook and wore rain boots a size too big. "This is Lily," Beth said, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder. "My daughter." Colton offered a wave. "Hi there." Lily looked at him, then at Rusty, and knelt without speaking. Rusty sat down beside her as if he'd known her forever. Beth watched, surprised. She's usually shy around new people, especially men. Colton didn't answer right away. He just looked at Rusty, who leaned gently against the little girl. Maybe he thought this dog didn't just need saving. Maybe he was here to save someone else, too. The days following Rusty's rescue passed quietly, and the sun-soaked trails of Echo Canyon began to feel less desolate with the golden retriever at Colton's side. The dog, whose golden coat had regained its natural luster after a few careful baths, adapted quickly to his new life. He moved with a gentle awareness, rarely barking, but alert to every scent and motion in the wild. Colton quickly learned that Rusty was about 2 years old, judging by his teeth and size. Though his past remained a mystery, his present was growing clearer with each passing day. Rusty began to join Colton on his daily patrols, trotting beside the jeep, with ears perked and tongue lolling a golden blur against the red rock landscape. He slept curled on an old army blanket in the back seat, always waking when the vehicle stopped. When Colton hiked, Rusty followed silently, staying close but never underfoot, pausing only to sniff deer trails or watch squirrels disappear into pinyon trees. The bond between them was unspoken but strong, like 2 wanderers who had found one another at just the right moment. Despite his calm nature, Rusty was still wary of strangers, except for Lily. Each morning, Beth brought Lily to the ranger station before school, where Colton and Rusty would be prepping for the day. Lily, now more curious than withdrawn, would sit on the wooden steps with Rusty resting his chin in her lap as she sketched in her notebook. Sometimes she drew birds, other times just abstract shapes that she said were feelings. Rusty never flinched when she touched his ears or hugged him around the neck. There was something about Lily, the quiet in her eyes, perhaps, that Rusty seemed to understand. He had been lost, too. Beth watched all of this with cautious optimism. At 38, she was still rebuilding her life. She worked mornings as an admin assistant at Pinefield Elementary and spent afternoons tutoring local kids in reading. She'd once dreamed of writing children's books, but after her husband's death, an experienced hiker who slipped during a solo trip into the foothills, Beth's world had narrowed. She'd become practical, efficient, and protective to a fault. But Colton's quiet steadiness and Rusty's gentle presence had begun to loosen something in her, a thread she hadn't realized was wound so tightly. One warm Saturday morning, as clouds drifted lazily across the sky, Beth and Lily arrived at the ranger station with a basket of muffins. Colton stood outside oiling the hinges of the old tool shed, while Rusty chewed on a stick nearby. Lily ran ahead, waving a folded paper. "I drew a coyote," she said, holding up her sketch. "It's howling at the moon." "That's pretty good," Colton said, crouching to examine it. "Looks like it could walk right off the page." Beth smiled as she approached. "I heard you're working on a new outreach project. Something about nature classes for kids?" Colton nodded. "I've been talking to the county office. They want to launch a program to teach basic ecology and trail safety. The park's understaffed, though, and I'm not exactly a kindergarten teacher." Beth's brow lifted, the corners of her mouth curving in a familiar way. "I've run science sessions at the library, and I'm still certified to teach from when I used to sub. If you need help." Colton hesitated a beat before replying. "Yeah, actually that would be great." And so began their quiet collaboration. They started small weekend sessions under the open-air pavilion at the edge of Echo Trail. A group of kids from the local school came with sun hats and water bottles, their parents grateful for something wholesome and free. Colton taught them how to identify animal tracks and use binoculars. Beth brought field guides and laminated fact sheets, and Lily, always at Rusty's side, became a kind of unofficial ambassador, leading the others through scavenger hunts and gently explaining how not to scare butterflies. At one of these sessions, they were joined by Marla Jennings, the town librarian, who offered to help with scheduling and promotion. Marla was in her early 60s with a silver bob haircut, sharp reading glasses, and an old denim vest covered in bird-shaped enamel pins. She spoke with a warm southern drawl and had a habit of finishing other people's sentences, especially when they paused too long. "I've seen a lot of animals come and go round here," Marla told Colton during a break, "but I've never seen a dog like yours. That Rusty, he's got soul. It's like he's listening even when nobody's talking." Colton just smiled. "Yeah, he's got that about him." As the weeks went on, Rusty's presence began to affect more than just Colton and Lily. The kids in the class learned to trust him, to observe him carefully. Rusty would sit still for long stretches while they drew him or practiced commands, never flinching when a little one tripped near his tail or dropped a snack. It was as if he'd taken on the role of guardian, not just to Colton, but to the whole group. One afternoon, during a lesson on native plants, Lily wandered away from the group. Rusty followed her, his body low and quiet, as if sensing something off. Beth called out worried, and the class paused. They found Lily a minute later sitting cross-legged under a juniper tree, sketching a small lizard on a rock. Rusty sat beside her, calm as ever. "She's okay," Colton said, crouching nearby. "He's watching over her." Beth placed a hand to her chest, exhaling slowly. I think she's finally coming back to me." That night, as the sun dropped behind the bluffs and the canyon turned purple with dusk, Colton sat outside his cabin with Rusty by his boots. He watched the stars blink to life above the dark ridgeline, a breeze rustling the sagebrush. He thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. A lost dog, a quiet girl, a woman who smiled again. And him. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. It came in long, ceaseless sheets that soaked the earth and blurred the outlines of the red rock cliffs that framed Echo Canyon. The air was thick with the scent of wet clay and pine, and the normally dusty trails had turned into rivers of slippery mud. The storm had arrived without violence, but its persistence wore on everything. Trees bowed under the weight of water, and the hills groaned under pressure. Colton Hayes, wearing his dark green rain gear, stood beside his jeep just off a narrow path on the upper ridge of the canyon. The sky was a dull, unbroken gray. His boots were caked in mud, and the notebook in his gloved hand was speckled with rain. The ranger had been out since sunrise, checking areas marked as erosion risks, documenting early signs of slippage or cracks along rock faces. He was supposed to turn back an hour ago, but something about Echo Ridge made him stay. A gut instinct, unexplained but undeniable. The radio, clipped to his belt, was useless. Every attempt to call the station resulted in static. He frowned, wiped the lens of his binoculars, and continued down the trail on foot, careful not to step too close to the canyon's softened edge. That was when the ground moved. It began with a soft, sucking sound like something releasing a breath. Then a low rumble. Trees above him shook, and a sharp cracking noise split the air. Before Colton could turn back, the slope beneath his feet gave way. A wave of thick, wet earth surged down like a beast, uncaged. He was swept off his feet, slammed against a tree trunk, then buried. Silence. A few seconds passed. Colton didn't know how many before he realized he was still alive. His body was pinned under what felt like tons of soaked earth and broken roots. One arm was completely trapped beneath him. His legs were pressed together in an unnatural position but not broken. His chest was tight from the weight and his vision swam. He tried to scream, but the mud had filled his mouth and nose. He choked, twisted his head just enough, and found a sliver of air barely enough to breathe. The storm still raged above, but now it sounded distant, like a world removed. Back in town, the storm beat against the windows of Beth Turner's house. Inside, Lily sat on the floor with her sketchbook, tracing the outline of a squirrel she'd seen days earlier. Rusty lay nearby, at first head on his paws, but then he stood. He moved to the window, stared into the rain, and gave a low growl. Lily looked up. "What is it?" Rusty paced once, then turned back to her tail. Stiff, he let out a sharp bark. Lily flinched. "Rusty, it's okay," she said softly, unsure. But Rusty didn't stop. He barked again, louder, and rushed toward her, tugging at the hem of her sweatshirt with his teeth. Not rough, just urgent. Lily yelped, pulling away. "Mom," she cried, stumbling to her feet. Beth rushed into the room. "What's wrong?" Rusty barked again, now standing between them and the front door. His eyes were locked on Lily's body, tense as if pleading. "He grabbed me," Lily said, voice trembling. "He won't stop." Beth frowned. Rusty wasn't a noisy dog. He never pulled, never barked, without reason. She took a step toward him, and he turned, rushed back to the window, then to Lily again, barking once more. Not angry, not afraid, just insistent. And Lily, though still frightened, stared at him differently now. She held her breath and listened. Somehow, deep in her chest, she felt it too. The rain had weakened, but the skies remained heavy, smeared with streaks of gray and ash. The roads of Pinefield glistened under the weight of the storm's aftermath, coated in slush and silence. Beth Turner stood at the edge of her porch, one hand gripping the damp wooden railing, her eyes following Rusty's relentless pacing. The dog was soaked, his golden coat matted against his lean frame, but he didn't stop. His movements were sharp, purposeful, as though his instincts were pulling him toward something he couldn't explain. And Beth, for the first time in years, decided to listen to a feeling that hadn't come from logic but from trust. Behind her, Lily stood with her rain boots half on her backpack, forgotten near the door. Her hair, usually neatly brushed and held back with simple pins, hung loose and slightly tangled. Her big brown eyes flicked between her mother and the dog. Rusty turned again, barked once, and then looked directly at her. "We need to follow him," Lily whispered. Beth turned. "Are you sure?" Lily hesitated just a second, but then nodded. "He's trying to tell us something." Beth had spent most of her life weighing decisions, always leaning toward caution. But right now, everything inside her screamed that waiting wasn't safe. She grabbed her keys, raincoat, and flashlight. Lily pulled on her boots, zipped her jacket, and together they followed Rusty into the storm-dampened forest roads that led toward Echo Ridge. The drive was slow. Fallen branches littered the trail, and shallow rivers of mud crossed the road like veins. Beth gripped the wheel tightly. Lily sat in the passenger seat, clutching Rusty's leash, though the dog remained, standing eyes fixed forward, tail taut with purpose. He whined softly every time the car slowed, ears flicking like radar. By the time they reached the overlook, the air was thick with silence. No other vehicles, no voices, just the creak of branches and the hiss of wind across wet stone. Beth parked crookedly at the trailhead, and Rusty leapt from the car before the door was fully open, paws skidding in the mud before catching the scent he'd been following all along. He dashed into the underbrush, and Lily bolted after him. "Lily!" "Wait!" Beth shouted, hurrying after her. The three of them scrambled through the uneven terrain, boots slipping, clothes soaked. The trees loomed dark and dripping above. They passed the half-buried outline of Colton's Jeep and paused only briefly. Colton was here, Beth breathed. He came this way. Rusty didn't stop. He darted into a narrow ravine just off the ridge, barking now in sharp, urgent bursts. Beth caught up to Lily, grabbed her hand, and together they rounded a bend in the trail and saw Rusty standing atop a swollen mound of mud and debris, his front paws frantically digging. Beth dropped to her knees beside him. The earth was loose, but packed in places, branches, sodden leaves, red clay pressed together. Rusty growled softly, scratched harder, then paused to sniff. Lily stepped forward slowly. Her voice broke the moment's stillness. "Colton." No reply. She stepped closer, crouched beside the dog, and touched the wet earth with both hands. "Colton, it's me," she said louder this time. "Please answer." For a moment there was only the sound of wind. Then, from beneath the dirt, a muffled rasping sound, barely audible. Beth's heart seized. She grabbed her phone, hands trembling, and called 911, giving precise coordinates. Then she dropped the phone and began digging with her bare hands, joining Rusty and Lily in clawing away at the muddy barrier. The rain had finally stopped completely, as if nature itself had paused to listen. Within minutes, a small team of search and rescue responders from Pinefield Emergency arrived, led by Dale Murrow, a heavy-set man in his late 40s with a thick beard, a perpetual squint, and a calm, commanding presence. Dale had worked over a decade in local fire and rescue, known for being steady and methodical under pressure. He jumped out of the lead vehicle and immediately took control. "Over here," Beth called. Dale jogged up, took one look at the digging site, and shouted, "We need the extraction gear now." While his team brought stretchers and portable floodlights, Dale knelt beside the hole Rusty had opened. He spoke gently through a radio connected to a listening probe. "Colton, if you can hear me, don't move. We're coming." Minutes passed like hours. Dale's crew worked with shovels and gloved hands, digging a precise tunnel toward the faint but steady sound of breathing below. Rusty stayed close, watching every motion, tail stiff but low. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tip of a boot emerged, mud-covered, motionless. Then a hand. Then Colton's face, eyes barely open but alive. "He's breathing," one of the responders called. Lily took one step forward, then another. Beth instinctively reached out to hold her back, but Lily broke free, ran to the edge of the circle of light, and shouted for the first time without fear or hesitation, "Colton." Her voice rang out high and clear, cutting through the trees. Colton, blinking under the flashlight, turned his head slightly at the sound. A faint smile appeared on his cracked lips. They pulled him free, slowly, carefully. His jacket was torn, face scratched, but he was conscious and aware. Rusty, padded forward, lowered his head to Colton's chest and whimpered. Beth wiped her eyes, unable to speak. Dale placed a hand on her shoulder. Another hour buried under that weight, and we might not have found him alive. Beth nodded, voice quiet. It wasn't us. It was Rusty. A week had passed since the rescue, and Pinefield felt subtly different, as if the town had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The sky had cleared, replaced by wide blue stretches and sunlight that seemed more golden than before. Echo Canyon, still bearing the scars of the landslide, stood silent and strong, its red walls catching the morning light like open arms. At the Pinefield General Store, a small wooden bulletin board near the checkout counter displayed a photo clipped from the local newspaper: Golden Retriever leads rescue in Canyon, landslide park, ranger saved in heroic effort. In the photo, Colton sat on a stretcher, pale and wrapped in blankets, while Rusty, ears up, eyes alert, stood faithfully beside him. Someone had scribbled a note beneath it in marker: Good boy Rusty. Colton was recovering well. The hospital had discharged him 2 days ago with cracked ribs bruises and a mild concussion. He walked with a slight limp and was told to take it slow for the next few weeks. But nothing, not pain or rest orders, could keep him from seeing Rusty. The dog had stayed with Beth and Lily while Colton healed, and when the ranger finally stepped out of the hospital van, Rusty bounded across the yard and crashed into his chest tail, wagging so hard his back legs nearly lifted off the ground. Colton laughed despite the pain. I missed you too, buddy. That evening, they sat around a small fire pit behind Beth's house. A chill crept into the spring air, but the flickering flames gave off enough warmth to keep them close. Beth had pulled her dark red cardigan around her shoulders, mug of tea in hand. Her auburn hair was loose for once, catching the firelight like copper threads. Lily sat beside her mother on a tree stump, scribbling quietly in her sketchbook. She wore a new yellow rain jacket, her choice from the store, after Beth promised a reward for her bravery. Rusty lay beside her chin, resting on her boots, eyes half closed. Colton sat across from them, wrapped in a wool blanket. His expression was relaxed, unguarded, in a way that was new. He stared at the flames for a long time, then looked at Rusty, then at Lily. I've worked in the park for 6 years, he said quietly, seen a lot of rescues, lost a few, but I've never seen anything like that. He didn't just find me, he knew where to look. He knew I was still there. Beth smiled softly. Animals remember love. Maybe he was just giving it back. I think he was giving more than that, Colton replied. He was giving us all something to believe in. A rustling sound came from the back porch, and a new figure emerged into the firelight, Carolyn Whitaker, a retired wildlife biologist and neighbor of Beth. She was in her early 60s, tall and willowy, with short-cropped white hair and a no-nonsense tone softened by her dry humor. Carolyn had taken a special interest in Rusty after the rescue, intrigued by what she called his intuitive behavior. Evening, she said, settling into a lawn chair with her own thermos of coffee. Hope you don't mind me dropping in. You're always welcome, Beth said. Carolyn leaned toward Rusty and offered him a peanut butter dog biscuit, which he accepted with royal dignity. Colton, she said, I've seen dogs with good noses, but this one, there's more to him. You sure he didn't come from a search and rescue line? We never found an owner, Colton said. No chip, no tag, no report of a missing golden. Carolyn raised an eyebrow. Then I'd say he found the right place to belong. Rusty shifted slightly, letting out a long breath as if in agreement. Lily looked up from her sketchbook. He's mine too, right? Everyone paused, then smiled. "Of course he is," Colton said. School had resumed earlier that week, and Lily, once silent in classrooms, her voice locked behind invisible walls, had surprised her teacher by raising her hand twice on the first day back. Beth had received an email later that night. Lily read aloud in front of the class today. She even helped another student with a math worksheet. "I don't know what changed, but thank you." Beth didn't reply to the email. She simply stared at the screen for a long time, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Around the fire, Lily drew a new picture. This one showed 4 figures, Colton, Beth, herself, and Rusty, beneath tall pine trees sitting beside a fire. She added stars in the corner and a crescent moon hanging above them. "I like it," Beth said when Lily held it up. "It's peaceful. It's real," Lily replied. Colton watched the girl and the dog, feeling something inside him click into place. Not a thunderclap or a revelation. Just a quiet understanding family didn't always arrive the way you expected. Sometimes it wandered in mud covered and wounded. Sometimes it barked or carried scars or healed you without a single word. Later that night, as the fire dimmed to embers and the group fell into silence, Colton reached forward and placed his hand on Rusty's thick golden fur. "You're not just my dog," he said. "You're my beginning." Rusty shifted slightly and pressed his head into Colton's hand. No one spoke after that. There was no need. The fire crackled. The stars blinked overhead. And in the quiet wild of Echo Canyon, something like peace settled down around them. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. Sometimes they come quietly in the form of a dog with golden fur, a child's voice finally breaking silence, or a second chance buried beneath the weight of the earth. In this story, Rusty wasn't just a pet. He was a vessel of love, of instinct, of something greater moving through the chaos of the storm. Some might call it fate. Others might say it was simply the bond of loyalty. But for those of us who believed this was the hand of God at work. Through the eyes of a dog, a girl found her voice. Through the loyalty of a companion, a man was pulled from the edge of death. And through shared courage, a family was formed where there was once only loss. In your own life, you may not face canyons or mudslides, but you will face silence, fear, and moments when everything feels buried. When that happens, look for the quiet signs. The bark at the door. The tug on your sleeve. The voice you thought was long gone. That might just be God sending someone or something to lead you home. If this story touched your heart, take a moment right now to share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below and tell us how animals or faith have shaped your life. And if you believe that miracles still happen even through a dog's love, type amen in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more true and inspiring stories, and may God bless you and your loved ones with protection, peace, and unexpected grace.